Welcome to this event. Satisfyer is putting on this amazing thing so we can all see their new toys and gadgets and talk about masturbation and talk to these experts who no doubt you guys already know, but I will intro again. And we're going to talk about masturbation, how we're doing it, how to do it with other people, why we're doing it, you know, all that stuff. All right, so let me introduce our panel. Next to me is Arielle Egozi. Hi, Arielle. Woo! You guys know her. She's a sex-positive writer, influencer, and founder of Other, a creative agency focused on bringing diversity and representation to media and advertising. Thanks for being here, Arielle. Amazing. Next to her, we have Megwyn White. Megwyn is a somatic sensuality guide and currently serves as Director of Education at Satisfyer. She focuses on bridging an integrated awareness of sexuality through aligning the body's nervous system and supporting orgasmic expression through self-touch. Ooh. We like self-touch here, right? Yeah. Next to her, we've got Mal Harrison. Hi, Mal. Mal is a clinical sexologist, founder, and executive director of the Center for Erotic Intelligence and a TED speaker. Woo! And then finally, we've got Coutney Cleman. Coutney co-founded the V Club, a coaching practice specializing in image, relationships, and self-empowerment. Yay! And I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Remy Kassimir. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I host the sex podcast, How Come? Woo! So let's jump into it. And anybody can go at any time. Feel brave, you guys. Because, you know, if you can speak up for yourself in the bedroom, you can speak up on this panel. Do you guys still think there is a stigma on masturbation, and is that improving?
I would say that I think there is a stigma a little bit still on masturbation, but absolutely it's improving. I think that there's been a lot of education that people have now received where we're like, okay, sex, it's not a bad thing. We all got here, right?
Somehow.
Through sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just also because of social media where we've been able to, you know, share things more publicly and also express our sexuality in new ways. And of course, sexual technologies like, you know, what we have within the Satisfyer, I think have really helped to bring more awareness because it also allows people to be more creative, to sort of think about, wow, like, you know, maybe I could explore, you know, this tool to help me
that I'd never thought was
a
thing.
That I never thought was a thing. And certainly, I mean, you know, the reason I became a part of the company was, you know, getting introduced to our non-touch wave pulse clitoral vibrating technology.
So good.
And completely life-changing, but also activating in a very different kind of way, you know. So I think that, you know, we do have still some work to do around the stigmas, and I think also around just educating people, you know, on what orgasm can actually be, because sometimes we have a very limited, you know, frame around orgasm. And I think as, you know, people have been sharing more their experiences, that those stigmas are starting to, you know, we're starting to get over that.
I also think it depends on where in the world people live, because I know if you're traveling with a vibrator and you try to visit Jordan, for example, those are outlawed and banned. So be careful what you carry in your suitcase, depending on where you're traveling. So there's clearly a stigma. You know, it's not just here in New York. We're very privileged in some sense that we have such liberation and freedom, but there are other places in the world where women are not allowed to own a vibrator or buy a vibrator or a Satisfyer or an oscillator or any type of toy, because it's somehow a threat to whether it's, you know, the male ego or just, you know, what their ideas around what sex should or pleasure should and shouldn't be. So there's definitely a stigma worldwide, and I do think it is changing. But I have a friend actually who's from Saudi Arabia, and she has these private little sex parties with her with her ladies. But they would probably get in a lot of trouble for that.
Do you think it's those sex toy laws? Are they the same for men and women in those places?
Honestly, I don't know, but I would I would be willing to put money on the fact that it's totally fine for a man to explore his sexuality and do whatever he wants, and not for a woman.
I mean, this is the interesting. Is this on? This is the interesting thing that if you look at, I'm personally not familiar with any panels, masturbation panels for men, because they don't really need to talk about it, right? It's accepted. It's part of their life. If men did not orgasm readily and easily, we wouldn't be here. It's just so different for women, and there's absolutely still a stigma. But we've come a very long way, thankfully.
Okay. And I think that's why, all of us up here doing the work, everyone out here in the audience doing the work, Satisfyer doing the work, curating this event, creating containers and spaces for us to talk about this is so important. Because without writers, without the PR reps, without the engineers and the educators creating these toys, without the social influencers talking about this on digital media, everything just stays silent. And I remember, the first time I touched myself, and it's still hard for me sometimes, like just sobbing because I felt, I was like, oh, all these feelings that I'm having must be wrong and weird, and no one had ever told me it was okay. And growing up, you see, in the films, like guys jerking off, or there's like, guys having their circle jerks or whatever it is, and that, there's stigma and all this stuff attached there, but at least they were talking about it. And I remember I have a 19-year-old sister, and when she was 15, sitting in a car with her, and I was like, Natalia, and she's like looking at me, and I'm like, we don't have to talk about this ever again. I just want you to know it's okay for you to touch yourself. And like, I keep driving, and she's like, sort of freaking out, but I was like, someone just needs to tell you, and like, we need to hear it.
How old was she then?
She was.
It's a little too late. I mean, like, no, you guys, no judgment. I just came for the first time last year. I'm 29. Like, whoa. But it's mostly because, like you're saying, like, if you didn't have a circle jerk at camp, like, you're the fucking weirdo if you're a dude. But most girls weren't talking with their friends about how do you do this and technique. And it seems like with a penis, there's kind of one technique that works. Whereas if we were having these conversations, you would have been a weirdo if you did it in a different way. So girls just kind of stayed right. Did anybody's parents ever talk to them about it?
So growing up, I had a magnet on the my mom's in the audience. So hi mom. I had a magnet on the fridge that said, "Darling, God's gift to women wasn't men, it was the shower massager." So I was able to take a hint, and then she had this Venus butterfly toy that was still in the box and like all taped up and everything. And I was pilfering through her nightstand, and I found it, and I took it, and I guess she realized it was missing. And then she was like, "Hey girl, we need to," I was 15, and she was like, "We're going to go shopping." So we went to this shop in Atlanta called Insurrections. And I was like, whoa, what is all this stuff? But at the same time, it was such a wonderful, liberating experience. And babies masturbate in the womb. We have scientific proof of this. So it is really our conditioning from our parents, from society and culture, that says like, oh, don't do that. That's bad. That's wrong. We are natural born pleasure seekers, and we do it from before we're even outside of the womb. So, we really do have to unpack a lot of the cultural conditioning that happens to us, and it's on us to do it for ourselves, but it's also why we're having these conversations and panels to help everybody and help each other do these things.
And one last, so I have many siblings, and I have a 5-year-old baby sister also. And when I was last home over like the holiday break, I'm like taking her to the bookstore, and next to the bookstore is like Agent Provocateur, like the beautiful, sexy lingerie store. And she grabs my hand and pulls me inside. I'm like, all right. And she starts touching all the things, and is like touching the mannequin and like looking at me to see how I'm going to react, and like sees these furry handcuffs, tell me, oh my God, like how these handcuffs are really beautiful. I want them. And just sort of seeing her fascination with this like sexy underwear, and like touching the mannequin on the butt, looking at me to see what I'm going to say. And I'm like, if this was a real person, you'd have to ask for consent, but like, this isn't real, so it's okay. Like, and just sort of testing the waters, already knowing at 5 years old that what she's doing is somehow like naughty, but she wants to, and is sort of like looking at me to test like how I'm going to react. It was just really fascinating to see her, and then me and my older sister, maybe raised at a different time, like repressed all of that like it's still hard for me to express my sexuality. And like, I talk about sex all the time, which is why I talk about it, because I'm like, okay, like unleash it. So yeah.
Yeah, I have an entire sex podcast, and I'll still make my boyfriend listen to episodes so that he can like help me edit sound if I like want him to hear something specific, because I can't speak up. So we abolished this myth that masturbation is wrong. Masturbation is good. It is healthy for you. It is great. There are some other myths, especially ones that are concerned and people always bring up, because I am obsessed with my Satisfyer travel. Like, that's my boyfriend now. And people are always like, do you think vibrators and other sex toys can cause a loss of sensitivity? The orgasm during partnered sex, or the misconception is especially about whether the excessive vibrator use make it difficult to orgasm during partnered sex from desensitization. I can talk. What do you guys think about that?
I'll take that one. No. The answer is no. You do not get desensitized by using a sex toy. But if you do orgasm, if you get yourself to orgasm the exact same way every time, and you do that for a long period of time, you will build a habit. And so orgasming a different way could take a little bit longer. So that is real. So I think the ideal thing would be to just vary things up. But you could, for example, use Satisfy Pro 2, just change it up on different settings, for example. Just don't, you don't want to get used to the exact same thing, because then, breaking that habit will actually be, it'll take a while. It's going to be quite frustrating, right? Because, and I actually think that a lot of women have a vaginal orgasm accessible to them, but they're so reliant on the clitoris for orgasm that they just sort of never developed that ability to orgasm vaginally through intercourse.
And there's kind of like a neural pathway thing that you're creating, like a
dopamine slips. Yeah. Like habit.
Yeah.
Just, there's like 5,000 million products over there, so you can use one a night.
Yeah, I think we're lucky with our line, because we have a lot of products that cover a lot of area, a lot of terrain within the body. The body and the skin and the tissues are like a master computer, so we want to be exploring the terrain of the body through many different methods, obviously not just with sex toys, but also with touch. And we can those pathways that get a little bit cemented within our brain when we're focusing too much maybe on one particular tool. But I think that that's why educating people on all the different possibilities, as far as it comes to sex toys, and also that it's not just even the touch of sex toys, it's also the creative stimulation. Like, you're with your partner and, you pull out the multi-fun, you're like, ooh, what could we do with this? How can we explore this? That actually stimulates a lot of that erogenous energy. So, we don't just orgasm just through touch. We orgasm sometimes through kissing. We orgasm sometimes even, through having really incredible eye contact. It's possible to explore a bandwidth of experience with orgasm, but I think the sex toy industry is doing a great service to creating more possibilities, because, we can get really stuck in the missionary position, thinking sex is only one thing. So, just having more options creates more possibilities.
I think a big part of this myth is perhaps rooted in the idea that, be careful, ladies, specifically, because if you use a vibrator, you no longer need a man. And a sex toy is a sex toy. It's plastic. It doesn't have feelings. It's not a person.
Men think of themselves. You think that's why we're here, just for that? No, we like you.
And you'll see in a lot of queer couples and anything that isn't sort of in the heteronormative space, there's lots of toys and there's lots of different things, and you're using your imagination and putting on a dildo, using these toys to create that fantasy and to create that connection and intimacy. And I think a lot of cis straight men tend to see it as this is the threat to me. And yeah, exactly. It's okay, you're just too bad. Like, cool.
Yeah, I found that if you just tell them like, oh, you can watch her squirt if you use this, they're like, oh, I'll buy her that. That's how you sell stuff to men. Okay. Do you guys think there's ever such thing as too much masturbation? No. Because I've read in Tantra books that men shouldn't do it but that says nothing about us. Okay.
They may just grow some hair on their palms, but that's it.
Yeah. What are some benefits of masturbation, both physically and mentally? And can it help with period cramps and headaches?
Absolutely. So Dr. Barry from Rutgers, who I absolutely adore, his wife had cancer. And so he started studying the benefits of orgasm, and he found that orgasm actually reduces pain by 50%. So obviously there are many physical benefits. It strengthens your immune system. And you could speak on this, I'm sure, with the vagus nerve, Viva Las Vegas, vagus. And so, I think it also contributes to our creativity. It can contribute to our healing if we know how to really play with our own erotic imaginations and our eroticism. So the benefits of masturbation are infinite and wonderful. And when we connect with our bodies, we own our bodies. And when we own our bodies, we have autonomy and agency, and we have more power in the world. We can go out into the world owning ourselves, and that's super powerful and so important for women today.
I mean, yes to everything. Yes to everything. I know for me personally, and I know for lots of other folks who've experienced sexual trauma, being physically and sexually intimate with a partner can be extremely overwhelming. And I went through a period of time where I was in a monogamous long-term relationship, and it was extremely overwhelming to have any sort of sexual intimacy with my partner. And the only way I could have that with myself and learn to heal it and sort of feel my body again and own my body was through touching myself and masturbating. And because it was a time when I didn't have to think about anybody else or what anyone else was expecting of me or how I might be hurting their feelings, how I might be perceived, if something hurt, if something didn't. I could check in with myself, and it felt safe. And it's been like the biggest tool to sort of.
And you weren't catering to somebody else.
Sorry?
You weren't catering to someone else's needs, which we're so conditioned to do.
Did anybody else ever think if you're somebody with a vulva that you could only have sexual pleasure if there was a penis in the room? Like, that's what I thought growing up. I was like, oh, I'll never have a good time unless somebody like loves me. But like, it's such a nice thing to be like, I love you. I want to touch your butt.
When you talk to women, like coaches, sex therapists, when you talk to women who've never had an orgasm, almost always they don't masturbate. Yeah, it's very difficult to be able to reach orgasm for a woman if she's never masturbated. It just takes a while to learn the body. For men, it's just easier. They're born to orgasm really because that's how we procreate.
Yeah, a lot of repressed energy, gets locked in the way when we're hypervigilant, right? Our jaws clenched, we get tight, we feel uncomfortable, and what happens is we actually are repressing. What happens is, what happens is we're, repressing our emotional energy. And so I think one of the things that we really have to start talking about when we talk about masturbation is also bridging people to awareness that orgasm is also tied to emotional energy through the vagus nerve that basically is a neurological plexus which bridges your brain to your visceral organs, your heart, your lungs, your digestive system. And when we can breathe and we can get into that embodied space, we can slowly nurture that energy of orgasm. And sometimes that's actually touching a part that's not our sexual center, because for women like myself also, I've had experiences with sexual trauma. Going right to the genitals actually can trigger that hypervigilance. So, bringing more awareness to the interconnections of the orgasm, not just being about genitals, but really being about the whole body, that the whole body is erotic. Our whole nervous system is actually the thing that we could be masturbating, not just the sexual organs.
Testes.
Yeah, the whole thing is a sexual organ, but also, like you were saying, men, they're created to masturbate and come, but we have an entire clitoris that is only meant to do that. And we didn't really, we've got somebody on our panel who helped discover the internal structure of the clitoris. Would she like to talk?
So yeah, we are born for pleasure and we're made for pleasure. And I think it is a lot of religion and a lot of patriarchy that has repressed and suppressed what we are naturally born to do. And I think to what you were saying, your point was, and this happens in the medical industrial complex, we've studied male penis owner orgasms. And because in order to procreate, we have to have ejaculation. Whereas in general, female identified, they don't have to have an orgasm to procreate. So there's been such an imbalance of the way we study sexual function, and pleasure for us has just been lost by the wayside, because who cares if you can't have an orgasm? You can get pregnant and have a baby, and that's all that matters. And so that's been a major problem and a challenge. Historically, throughout the medical industry, we've been completely lacking in the structure, and we didn't see the first 3D sonography of it until 2009. Mm-hmm. I published a picture of my sweetheart little thing in 2011 for Museum of Sex. It was the first time outside of a medical journal that we saw what the structure of the erect internal clitoris looked like, and everybody just went, hey, they went crazy. Oh my gosh, so this thing. Yeah. It's big. And so we are born, all of us are born and made for pleasure. Like we derive pleasure from food, mm-hmm. right? Like we are hardwired for pleasure. We are hardwired for connection. And so we are a species that seeks these things out. And unfortunately, society and culture has told us otherwise, but it's there.
Yeah, and it makes everyone a nicer person. Like, have you ever seen someone pre-cum and post-cum? They're way less stressed. It's good for everyone else. Like, everyone just jack off and chill.
Totally.
Yeah, and it can help with period cramps and headaches. Right?
I wish some of the world leaders would actually just have their circle jerks, because we probably have a lot more peace.
The UN covered in squirt.
Yes.
That would be awesome. Why do you think women still feel the need to fake orgasms with their partners?
Oh, girl, how much time do we have? So Freud messed us all up by saying that back in the 20s said little immature girls have clitoral orgasms and only mature women have vaginal orgasms. And what we know now from understanding the erect internal structure of the clitoris is that all orgasms are clitoral. They stem from the same place. Orgasm is actually an involuntary reflex of our autonomic system. Am I saying this correctly? Autonomic system. And so, thank you. And so, it's what happened was they started publishing these marriage manuals, which are the modern day version of like Cosmo or whatever. And so men started thinking, oh shit, I'm married to this little girl who's not having these orgasms. And women started thinking, oh shit, he's going to throw me in the insane asylum if I don't have an orgasm. And so this really bred this culture of faking. So you have that, and you have this whole power dynamic of women being oppressed. We couldn't vote. We couldn't have credit cards. We couldn't own property. We couldn't work. We had no rights unless we were married. So when we got married, we had to definitely cater to the male ego and say, yes, you're Mr. Don Juan and you do everything amazing, and because otherwise we'd get thrown to the crazy bin, which happened by the thousands. A husband would get sick of his wife or disagree with her and be like, you're insane, go. And she would get sent off and she would lose her children, everything. And this was an actual reality of existence. So this really shaped why we faked orgasms. And so when I look at the history of like Scandinavians and indigenous tribes, they didn't have this bullshit getting in their pleasure's way. So it really is, I hate Freud for that reason, but and obviously there are other, religion and all of these things that got in the way. But this is why, because we have been conditioned to cater to the male ego to ensure our safety and protection and sanity and place in this world and the ability to just have some semblance of rights. And here we are now where we can do all these things, and yet we're still, the greatest thing you can do for the sisterhood is just to not fucking fake your orgasm. No, dude. No. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that we can circle back to the vagus nerve, because honestly, there's so much we can talk about there. But the vagus nerve is also tied into the muscles of the face and the connections of the voice. So it's like, and it's also connected to the clitoris. So it's kind of like the live wire that like allows the orgasm to become more full-bodied. It's connected between the brain, and it connects to the heart, the lungs, and also the digestive system. It's a neurological plexus. So, when we are actually expressing prosodic sounds, not just the voice, prosodic sounds are the sounds that, like, let's say the mother, when she's attuning to the baby, making those coos, those sounds that are also emotionally embodied. This is actually laying down the neural networks within the brain, allowing the baby to actually develop in a way that's healthy. So when we make sounds that are embodied, that are emotional, that also are, when we really unleash the voice from that very primal place, which sometimes doesn't always look pretty. Right, and this is one of the other reasons why I think, a lot of times it's not that, but so I think that's another aspect to the conditioning of why, as women, we want to look beautiful, we want to appeal to our partner, and so we're maybe also getting our sex education, primarily through porn. So we're like observing how she does it, and we're maybe hitting those sounds in the way she does it. But the key is actually to connect moment to moment and activate those prosodic sounds, which are actually felt in the soft tissues within the face. And the highest connections of the vagus nerve are actually in the palate, as I had mentioned before. So that's why when we're like, those really high-pitched sounds that come naturally, we're actually helping to ground the orgasmic energy within the body.
Does it make sense that both my mother and I are opera singers then?
Yes, totally.
It's like totally makes sense all of a sudden. All that training to open my throat I thought was for blowjobs, and meanwhile it was for my own orgasm.
Well, Maria Callas, do you know that Maria Callas, this is a crazy story, she was a very famous opera singer. And she actually used to practice arias while having sex with Onassis.
I'd have to practice something having sex with him too, to be honest.
But I think a lot of this also comes back to there was the culture of not talking about it, especially for women. So like if you're not having that internal orgasm at the same time as the dude, which is what we see in movies, then like you're a broken woman, and like don't tell your friends about that, especially his friends. Because then they're going to think there's something wrong with him or whatever. But it's like,
whatever happened to ladies first? I mean, who's a gentleman? Like, also, if you don't last long enough and you come before me, then great, go down on me. Use your fingers. Let me hump your leg. It's all good. We can make it work. Use a satisfier, use a toy, but like, let's have a mutually satisfying, wonderful time.
Well, I think that goes back to the fact that it takes women a lot longer on average than men. Orgasm. For men, it's usually about 10 minutes. For women, it's 30 to 45 minutes on average, and it could be much longer. And I think one of the reasons why women fake orgasms is that there is they put an expectation on themselves to orgasm faster because they know their partner's ready. And also, I think a lot of men put an expectation on women because they can't understand why it might take someone an hour. But that's just how the female bodies work. So I think it's just mixed false expectations.
We're on different timelines, and that's why the pleasure gap between lesbian couples is so tiny, because they're on the same timeline. Gay couples, so tiny. For heterosexual couples, it's huge.
There's also a lot of power and power dynamics that are happening. So, right, like, we're not existing in a vacuum when you put it all into perspective. Like, I don't think I've ever been asked by a man. Recently it's changed because my filter is
your job.
Exactly. Yeah. But, you know, what do you want? What do you like? No one's ever asked me that. I never asked myself that. Nobody else. So how do I know? I don't know what makes me come. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think there was this thing of, like, guys know what they're doing. I don't know.
Really?
How did they just come out of the womb? Like, yeah. But it was just like, he's going to do a bunch of stuff to you, and then you'll like it, maybe. But no, like, it's way easier to figure yourself out first.
But and also, like, why can't all of us just have a conversation when we're with a new partner and straight up talk about this to begin with?
Yes. Are we having sound problems? This is news to me.
I have a talk into it.
Yeah.
News to me.
It'll be great. You guys can all hear us. Okay. You can smile, you guys. It's okay. We're having a good yay. This is fun. Okay, good. So yeah, for that reason, I think solo sex could never hurt your relationship. Learn your body. Then you can tell. I say this all the time, but it's like handing if a guy can't make you come, and you can't make you come. That's like being like, here, this is a 9-sided Rubik's Cube. Figure it out. Also, you're naked. That's
One
tough.
of the things I say to young women when I'm doing workshop, so my company does erotic intelligence education in colleges and universities, and something I say often is, why on earth would you risk pregnancy or an STD if you haven't learned how to get yourself off first?
Yeah.
Why would you put yourself in that position? Do we have
Something.
Is there a monitor somewhere that's a little loud? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah.
If they had told us in sex ed you can have orgasms and never get pregnant, we would have done that.
The other thing is, the more we orgasm, the more orgasmic we become. Right? So if through masturbation we can orgasm more, it's just going to be easier with a partner.
How do you guys, because a lot of people ask me this regularly, like, how do I incorporate masturbation into sex with a partner, and how do I incorporate sex toys?
So one of the biggest pieces of advice I give couples oftentimes when they're struggling with intimacy or just learning each other's bodies and how to help each other get off, I say take turns with one partner holding the other and the other masturbating. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of people at first, I know from personal experience, because I made myself do this before I ever advised it. And, you know, it's you're in a very vulnerable place.
Yeah.
But it's also beautiful and tender and wonderful. And then you get to do it with your partner, and you're watching them and you're seeing what they like and how they like to do things. Yeah. So I think that's just a wonderful starting place for that.
Totally. Arielle? Nothing?
Betty Dodson actually wrote about this in her book, where she's amazing.
Yeah.
And she was, really, when she was working with couples, she was seeing that, like, there's just so much pressure sometimes on the other person, to, like, make you, have an orgasm. And so, in working with couples, basically telling them to masturbate side by side became this really erotic and very empowering experience because, in Tantra, also having some space, some distance, creates more of that desire. So it's actually something that's really fun to play around with. I actually gave a couple that I was working with this assignment because they were getting almost too close. You're in a partnership, and you get a little too close sometimes, and it sort of kills that desire. So gave them this assignment of, okay, you're going to record your voice, and you're going to tell them exactly what you want to do. You're going to guide them into a deep masturbatory ritual, and you're going to send it, randomly. They won't know when they're going to get it. And then, you have to create a ritual around really taking that guidance. So that's another way,
Yeah.
you know, a couple can explore, because sometimes, you know, I know, like for myself, you know, it's exciting having that interplay, but it's also fun having that self connection. So that's one idea. And then in terms of like sex toys, I think that's, you know, it should be something that's playful, I think, you know, and very like, I like making it creative.
Would you present it during sex or before, like for most people?
I think you can certainly talk about it, you know, create some like even explore a little bit on your own before maybe going into that journey. It's also fun to have like special names for your toys. Like, you know, we have the penguin, and I think it's a fun one, like Pass the Penguin, you know? So you can create these like games using the toys, and that can actually also release a lot of inhibition. You know, sometimes just having that like, having that context to explore like makes you laugh, and oftentimes that takes the edge off.
Yeah.
I would definitely say I advise talking about a lot of that stuff outside of the bedroom, because when you're in the heat of the moment and then you spring up this fantasy of a threesome or this or that, or, you know, it's not the time to throw in these things that, whoa, we haven't talked about this, what's going on. It's always better to talk about like, oh, I want to try this toy next time we're having sex, or I want to, you know, incorporate this, or I want to name our toy and like have a code word, or, you know, create a game. It's always better to talk about that stuff outside of the bedroom, so that when you're in the bedroom, you're on the same page, and there's no, there are no surprises that kind of make someone feel threatened or insecure or weirded out or freaked out. So I tend to advise on, you know, having these discussions over brunch on a Sunday, and then, you know, having a nice little nightcap.
If you're not sure how to bring it up and you feel shy, you could, for example, say something like, oh, I came across this article and it mentioned this and that. Oh, what do you think about trying it? And always use the sandwich approach, right? Talk about how much you enjoy the relationship, then bring up this thing you want to do that because it's going to make the relationship even better, and then end again about how much you love the other person. So obviously make it sound natural, and not rehearsed, but it's such a vulnerable, sensitive topic. You never want to come off like you're criticizing your partner.
Sure.
And a lot of people, depending on what their comfort level is with sex, they can take it as a criticism. And another trick is, for example, if you want to bring a vibrator or a dildo into your bedroom, you probably want it to be smaller than your guy. Right? Really, it's because otherwise, then it does make them feel bad. And I actually would agree with that.
Yes. That my mic agrees too. I'm gonna speak. Yeah. Well, here we are. What are you gonna do? Yes, I think that is. What about if you're single though? Like so many people are single. They enjoy playing with their toys solo. They want to, like a lot of women, they're not having sex with guys just to get that. They want to have orgasms. They want to. How do you introduce it to somebody who you're not in love with?
Well, I mean, if you're with somebody and you're not in love with them and you're there for pleasure, you're there for pleasure.
Yeah.
And you're there for connection. So why not have the courage to be like, yo, I really love this thing. Let's do this now. Like you're both equally in a situation where you're seeking pleasure together. And if there's mutuality and reciprocity and respect, then what's the big deal?
Totally.
It's actually easier in many ways to introduce a toy to somebody you barely know rather than in a long-term relationship, because you've been together for a long time and suddenly you say, oh, I want to try this and that. In their mind, they're thinking, oh, have things been really shitty for a while?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Also, life is short. Like, get the toy, get at it, have fun. I did an interview for a French magazine, and the translation was so funny when I read it, because my name is Mal, so in French that means bad. And the whole article starts off like, I am Mal, and when I was younger, I liked to talk to boys about sex, and it was my way of litmus testing them. And that was my way of seeing who was comfortable and who could handle me.
Yeah.
And that was genuinely like, all right, like, let's get straight to the point. I don't care about, what you do for a living. I'd rather hear about your passions, but also like, can you handle my sexuality? Can you handle my sex drive? And so I think it's like life is way too short to beat around the bush and talk about the weather and all the bullshit and then go on 3 dates and then see if you're even fucking sexually compatible. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, let's talk about this from the get-go. We're erotic beings. We're pleasure-seeking beings. Let's see if our pleasure values align.
It's a great answer, but also your mom just saying bush in the middle of it made my night.
Another idea, especially because I think it's hard. I think it's more intimidating for men, you know. Well, not always, but we'll just contextualize it in that way. So, you know, using the toy on him, like really introducing that experience, you know, teasing his penis, you know, using a vibrator to, you know, go into that frenulum and, you know, mix it in with the blowjob, like explore integrating it in a way where he's like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. How can I work with you now?
A lot of the air ones you can put on nipples too. You can put on the tip of a penis. And then they're like, even if it's not like necessarily doing it, they're like, oh, this is what's happening to you. Like that turns me on too.
Yeah. Make a dance, like create also like it's a prop, you know, use it as a prop, you know, like create fantasy essentially. And you can definitely use a toy to do that.
Totally. Do you guys think there's one thing that women or vulva owners should be focusing on more in order to have orgasms?
Yeah, I think, you know, connection to sensuality as a whole, like like what I was discussing before. You know, really unlocking that connection of the emotion to the touch. And also not focusing so much on an end result, you know, having that idea that I'm like going to accomplish something, having that sort of more goal-oriented mindset really can inhibit, you know, the experiences of the moment because you're not in the moment. You're like 2 steps ahead. So I would say, you know, breath, honestly, is probably one of the most important aspects to really unlocking the orgasm. Take a yoga class, you know, do some meditation, slow down your breathing. It's, you know, I talk about the our Satisfyer Pro 2. Use it on a slow setting and just work with slow, deep breathing and see if you can get comfortable with that. Because that's honestly the key to everything.
Totally.
I just keep going back to, and maybe because this is like a place where I'm at in my personal life, but then I keep seeing it sort of reverberate everywhere else around me, of figuring out what you want and asking for it. And I think that even like take it out of the bedroom, take it out of sex, take it, like practice it, you know, when you're at the supermarket, when you're walking down the street, when you're on the train, and all of that then can translate, and you can bring it back to like the vulnerable spaces of being naked with a partner or with a new person or in the bedroom. And then it's not awkward to like whip out a sex toy. And like, if your partner, I'm of the opinion, can't handle that, like this sex toy is bigger than them, then like that's a conversation to have that's much bigger than just like the sex toy. That's like, we're talking about oppressive systems and sort of tackling that. And making space for the emotions, making space for the vulnerability, but realizing all of like sex, just one piece, and it's like everything, our bodies, our identities, the way we interact in the rest of the world, that's what ends up coming back.
I think that's very compassionate, because for me personally, if I met a guy who is like really threatened over a sex toy, I'd be like, you're definitely not the dude for me. You're super insecure and we're never going to work out. Like that would be a litmus test for me. And I don't care about working through his shit and healing him and creating space. Like, boom, next, don't have time for you. So that's, you know, that's an interesting, way more compassionate than I am.
But I'm saying like that's where I'm at. Like if someone comes with me with that, whereas before I was so focused on like pleasing them or pleasing the world or whatever, like I am no longer there. So like that person is no longer there for me, because I understand how it's connected to everything. Like it's not just about the sex. It's probably the way that you talk to me.
Their security with who they are as a person. Are they a whole person? Are they able to bring themselves to the table and be fully present and be there?
And if I know what I want, then like I can whip out the sex toy. I can know how to ask for it, then I'm going to have orgasms, then I'm going to come, then I'm going to figure it all out. But if I'm not practicing that, not just in sex, but like in every other way, if I'm not harnessing my power, playing with attention, whatever that is, then it all makes it harder.
I always tried to put myself in a guy's shoes that if I was using a toy or whatever, I'm like, how would I feel if there was a fleshlight in the room or whatever? Initially, I was like, not great. Like, I wouldn't like that. But then you try to bring the compassion into it, and you're like, if that's what he needs, and then you should be into his pleasure. And if you're expecting him to be into yours and fix, I got some baggage, like, we should all be trying to help each other. And I think it's really cool that like Satisfyer has these men's products now that we can literally figure out, oh, would this offend me in the room? And so far, no.
And also, they're way more sleek and beautiful than Fleshlight or Fleshlight Launch. P.S. I love the Satisfyer men's products that I saw tonight.
How can we make it so that our conversations, we are all talking about sex all the time, but how can the average woman make it so talking about sex and masturbation is normal with her girlfriends or her daughter or anyone else who has a vulva?
I think it's super dope that there's companies like Satisfyer, there's companies like Unbound, like there's actually a vibrator that I'm wearing on my hand. I get compliments on this ring all the time, and then should I decide to disclose, actually, it's a vibrator. Circling back to my middle sister, actually, this company also has this very cute, like, travel-sized kit that has, like, a little bullet vibe. It has some condoms. I think it has some lube. And, like, the packaging is just so cute and holographic and, like, millennial that, again, I came home, talk about it. I was like, look, this little bag, isn't it cute? She was like, oh, my God, yeah, thanks so much. Gave it to her, done. And just sort of, like, beginning to open that conversation. And again, like, if everybody here leaves tonight empowered enough, to like say the event that they went to post about it on Instagram, to like tell their friend, then it makes it okay for everyone else around you to, like they're talking about sex, cool, okay. Like I can't tell you how many people just like disclose, like I'm like says sex out loud, and then because they have no one else to tell. So people want to, and people ready, just it's creating that safe space for them.
I think also the Me Too movement has really helped to like bring a lot of this more out in the open, because underlying people not talking about sex is actually also having a lot of shame.
Yeah. And
also a lot of the shame is rooted in sexual trauma and not wanting to disclose experiences that may have been toxic, sexually. And, obviously when in the era where we weren't talking about that actually created a lot of repression, a lot of psychological disconnect around sexuality. And so I think now, we're bringing that out into the open. People are talking about their experiences, good and bad. And I think that's a huge piece to it, because for the most part, most people have had good and bad experiences with sex. And now that we can talk about that, and not feel ashamed, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I think honestly, it's going to lead to a lot better sex overall. Yeah. It's as that movement continues, it's going to actually create a larger conversation around consent and understanding. Well, how do I even, if I'm not in my pleasure, how do I even know to say yes or no? So eventually, I see in the future, we'll be so tuned into our pleasure. It's going to be easy. You can be like, no, thank you. And not go into like, a feeling of shame or, because what happens, when we're triggered, when we go into shame, our throat literally gets locked. It's that vagus nerve again.
Yeah.
And so, we don't speak up. So it's a problem that I think is naturally going to be evolving, especially as we have these conversations around sexuality.
Totally. You guys, thank you so much for having these conversations and this one tonight. I think you're all doing amazing work. You guys give them a hand, please. We're going to be recording this for some people at home. Where can everyone find you online and follow your work, Arielle?
LADYSAVAJ, Instagram.
Megwyn?
Well, I work with Satisfyer, so you can find me there. And I also have my own body work as well, which I call Haptic Body.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mal?
Center for eroticintelligence.org and Erotic Intelligence on Instagram is the company's.
Awesome. Courtney?
The V Club and just the website, vclub.com.
Perfect. You can listen to my podcast, How Come, on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. Follow us at How Come Podcast. We always ask this to everyone at the end of a sexual experience, and this has been one. Did you guys finish?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. Yes.
Great. Did you finish?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes,
No?
and thank you for coming.
Took the words out of my mouth, Courtney.
Most definitely.
Great. And I squirted everywhere. You guys, thank you for coming, and we'll see you all after this. Thank you, guys.